returned from closed session. For the record, no formal action of the city council was taken in closed session. Anything else you need to do, Kelly? We good to go back? Okay. So that would conclude. That would include item number 19. Now we're going to go back and do item number 13. Consideration of ordinance number 2018-04 for on third and final reading, approving the preliminary and final plat of Fairway Woods Edition, tracts of land north of Hillcrest Drive and between North 8th Street and Augusta Drive. Ed, did you want to add anything to this?
Yeah, the most recent updates was JEO submitted their second opinion of their review of the stormwater drainage plan. That should have been included in your packet. And we've been working with Olson's and finalizing the utility easements and stuff for all the different blocks and different phases.
Thanks, Ed. Any other questions or comments for Ed? And we have the ordinance on number 13, then you'll see there's also under 13A, consideration for approval of the subdivision agreement of 4 Fairway Woods Edition. Any questions or comments on item 13? Yes, Sid.
Just how we do this, if we approve 13, does that also include A, or is that separate?
I would look for a separate motion on A so that we can discuss that specifically with you to address the changes that we've made even from the one that you have considered here tonight.
So for 13, then we would just need someone to introduce the ordinance.
I'll introduce the ordinance.
An ordinance to approve the plat entitled Fairway Woods Edition to the city of Seward, Seward County, Nebraska, as hereinafter set forth, located north of Hillcrest Drive and between North 8th Street and Augusta Drive, to provide for publication of this ordinance in pamphlet form, to provide for a time when this ordinance shall take effect. The ordinance has been read by title and is designated as ordinance number 2018-04, and the title is hereby approved. Is there any further discussion? Let me move forward here. So then, because we've already done the third reading, so then next is, this is ordinance number 2018-04. Would anyone like to move that this ordinance be passed and adopted as read? We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, the question is, shall ordinance number 2018-04 be finally passed and adopted? Please register your vote. Please display the votes.
In favor. Welcome back, Camper Chris Miller Schmidt. Hands, motion carried.
I believe this is our only, this is our last ordinance for the evening, so we'll need one final motion to make the ordinance as a part of the final record.
So moved.
Second. Your motion and a second. Please register your votes. Please display the votes.
In favor. Welcome back, Camper Chris Miller Schmidt. Hands, motion carried.
All right, and that was 13. On 13A, Greg, did you want to explain that?
Yeah. Pursuant to the subdivision agreement that was provided to you in your packet, we have made a few changes in designations, and what we'll look for tonight is pursuant to this discussion to adopt with city administration's approval the subdivision improvement agreement, because we don't have a final total draft, because we were making drafts towards the end of the afternoon, this afternoon, and negotiating with the developer. But I will note some of the changes that were recommended in the portion that refers to parks and open spaces. Traditionally, we don't have anything, as you see in 9A, the last sentences of 9A. It talks about keeping the turf grass and native grasses in the area of the portions could be designated as a park. Keeping those free from weeds, attractive, and at a turf height of 6 inches and free of debris. Obviously, this is something we would do in our parks normally, and so I stressed that I had some concern about that language, that we wouldn't want to treat this any different than any other parks. And they didn't feel that they wanted that either. They just wanted to note that this would protect it from future, just note that we're responsible for it and protect it from future situations where you see like what Lincoln's done because of cost savings, where they're letting their parks grow naturally as high as they want because they're not cleaning them out. They feel that due to the neighborhood nature of this park, rather than it being a natural large park, that they want to see it kept at that normal required turf height that we would require all over the city. And then obviously they just mentioned snow removal, which, as I stressed to the developer, will remove snow on the trail just like we would other portions of the trail within the city, because it is part of our trail system, rather than just parks and sidewalks. And so Bob's guys will be on that just as quickly as it would for any other portion of the trail system. Moving on, just a reminder of the exchange that we're doing, an exchange for the considerable amount of parkland well and above and beyond what is required in the ULDO. We're exchanging any upfront fees that we would normally require for development, which are small in comparison to the price and value of what we're getting. So we're getting the entire parkland, we're getting a 8-foot trail, concrete trail poured, a prepped area for a park designated in there, and then they're also going to clear all the trees to thin that out pursuant to our recommendations so that we have a nice wooded area adjacent to the park. So they're providing all of that in lieu of paying fees. And when me and Ed did the numbers, just on the market rate of the value of what they would potentially sell their lots on the low end, we've done the numbers and we're getting a substantial deal. And so that was what we talked about, and that is implemented within this. Looking at some of the other elements that we talked about.
Can I back you up?
Yes.
So on 9, all of 9 is staying, because one of your red lines had questions on B.
Oh, sorry, 9C. Pursuant to our discussions, in the very, very initial discussions with the developer, they had designed a trail system that would continue on adjacent to the east side of the golf course along hole 1 up there, or is it 2?
2.
It's 2. 1 and 2, and then continuing on up to Country Club Drive. And that was only in a peripheral concept design, and then included, I believe, in some of their concepts that we may have seen if you went to their public event at the Civic Center. But in the formal consideration of the plat, all of our discussions with the plat, that trail system is not included in it, and we didn't discuss it at any meetings. Planning and zoning didn't discuss it at any meetings. And so I felt it was unfair to include that in this at this time. Also, it's a major consideration for golfers. It was identified by a number of people that have golf and have concerns with golf when they read that. And so, talking to the developer, I think we've agreed to remove that at this time.
So C is.
Mm-hmm.
But they may come back, and so C will be removed.
C is out,
But I think the plan is to have a discussion later
okay.
about what makes sense as far as, one, the safety of the golfers and the people on this path, and also making sure that it, I think the intent was is to link it up to, like to have a trail access essentially to get out of the area, so that it's not just a trail to nowhere that you would turn around and go back, but it would actually get up to, I think, Country Club Drive.
Yep.
And then it would be able to access out of the subdivision, I believe was the intent at some point, but that's not, like he said, it's not part of this discussion today, but it's still kind of out there as a concept.
Yep. And so we'll need to formally adopt that as a consideration at another time. Again, moving.
Something else.
Just on B, did you have anything to say on B? 'Cause I have a question on B if you don't.
Nothing
9B.
specific, other than we are, pursuant to the way this is defined, we will take over maintenance of all of the outlots, which would be the detention cells as well.
So my question on that was, and just out of curiosity, like the detention cells I'm familiar with in town are like, well, there's one like kind of by where Evergreen is, right, just off the highway, that low level, that's a detention area, right?
Yes.
And then in Ridge Run, they've got, that pond is like a detention, I mean, but it's a pond, right?
Yes.
So my question is, of the other developments in town that have detention ponds or areas, does the city maintain any of those, or does the development or the neighborhood maintain those?
I believe the one by Evergreen is maintained by them.
The one at the bottom of 15 is ours, on the highway there by, was it Cedar 15?
Park.
The one at the bottom of 15,
That one with the fence around it,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
that
That's
one
one
would
of
be
ours.
one of
We
ours.
maintain that one.
Anyone by the middle school?
just added we added a berm there that we're responsible for, behind off of Star Street, that agreement. It's not, I don't know if that's really technically a detention cell, but there is a cell back there. I think we're responsible for the berm to maintain that. We,
I don't know that we're responsible after we were built. Okay.
Yeah. Does that answer your question?
And then
Yeah.
the fenced area at the bottom of
15.
Star Street down by the school, there's a fenced portion there where it's the most low lying, and so.
I don't think that's ours, is it?
No.
Yeah, that's the school's.
So, there's a number of, some areas we do maintain, some we don't. And so, here for sure, of the 4 main ones, the one in the middle of the golf course would be maintained by us, the one in the park will be maintained by us, no matter what, because we obviously control those 2 assets. And then the 2 additional ones is the ones that would be more of a non-traditional, or more like what we do at the bottom of 15. And so those would be the 2 residential ones that we
So
would
D
maintain.
and F would be those that you're talking
I
about?
believe so. Is that, what page are you on there?
2.
Two?
Yes, outlot D and outlot F.
Okay.
I believe for the subset, the only other addition that is not in here, and this was discussed with the developer today, and we had this discussion, it was brought up as a concern of Councilman Schmidt, also the city attorney, is we're gonna ask that they put in, it'll be in the subdivision improvement agreement, the final language will be in the covenants for the homes, specifically along adjacent to the golf course, is we ask for some sort of indemnification and understanding of liability that if you build a home next to a golf course, you're kind of undertaking certain risks. And so don't come back at the city, the developer, or the property owner. You know what you're getting yourself into. And so basically, and they've agreed to that, to cover both themselves and the city. And so we'll work with Kelly, we'll look at some different covenant language and stuff, and they agreed that that would seem reasonable and that we should also include that. So that would be the last additional element. So essentially with those changes and some other, I think you have the final version here in regards to the red lines. Those are the major substantive changes that we'll add.
And then just to be going through this, Max, to you or Mark, as you're listening to this, is there anything that you've heard that you want to clarify or add on to, or anything? I just want to make sure we didn't misstate anything to the council. Okay.
I guess I would, this is a minor point, but on the trail, which would be in C there, I understand, you know, that trail shown north of the development along the golf course is kind of a preliminary idea, and it's not been vetted, and it's difficult to commit to now. But I would say, just as we thought about our development, I mean, the city is gonna have this really wonderful trail loop. And I've heard the city describe a priority of connecting some internal kind of spokes to that loop. We think the trail we are going to install in the long park will be a nice amenity by itself, but it is also a little bit of trail to nowhere, right? Until it's connected to, you know, the rest of the master trail and to other parts of town. So we would just, I guess, ask you to, you know, nobody's committing to it today, but just keep thinking about that idea of, because I think everybody in the community benefits if that trail becomes a real network that, you know, interconnects rather than just short, unrelated segments. The other piece is the city's making a tremendous investment in the golf course, and that's a great thing for the community. You know, the ability of some non-walker, some non-golfers to benefit and take advantage of that amenity in a way that's safe, I think is also worth considering. And other communities, I think, have run those walking trails alongside golf courses, found ways to do it in a way that's safe and works. So again, that's probably a little bit, it's not a major issue for tonight, and it's nothing that's being committed to, but I would just, as we worked with our planners, you know, there were a lot of things about the idea that were attractive, and we just ask you to keep maybe thinking about that in the future.
Yeah, and if there is a connected, it was connected out of the neighborhood and part of the larger network, presumably it would get more access by people in the community who can who could access it easier than if there's just one way in and one way out. I think it's kind of what you're saying, so, yeah, but that's not, we don't have to worry about that tonight, but you keep that in the back of your mind moving forward. Did you have anything else to add on the agreement?
On the agreement, no.
Are they approving this just tonight?
Just recommend approval subject to those changes is the
Okay.
motion I look for. Just because this is gonna be the end of this, I would like to say, I'd like to thank the public, the council, and also Ed for his hard work on this, and the developers. The reason being is, I think this process allowed us at the administration the opportunity to run through what is a considerable development. And ultimately, barring what you do here in this moment, I think at this point with your prior vote, you pretty much recommended approval of this development. This may be one of the largest developments ever approved in Seward, and that's a big undertaking. But we've learned a lot from it, and I would commend Olson and the developers in regards to showing us the opportunity that we can undertake by having some of these public open houses and things ahead of time. And we're gonna look to change some of the process that we undertake at the city and through the ULDO to make sure that we continue, because we saw with the Shoal Creek division where we didn't have that, how much more we benefited from when we went back and restarted and had that public output early on, and gave people an idea to come in, not so much in a formal setting, and allow them to interact with the developer and engineers and talk about things and point at maps and really get accustomed to what's being proposed and get their head wrapped around it. And that, you know, that's gonna grow out of what they put together and what they initially started with by having their meeting over at the Civic Center. And so I just wanna commend them and thank that, because that's gonna help us develop a better process in the future to make it better for our citizens and the general public around development, to get a better feel for what's going on and consider it one way or the other. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
So at this point, what you have before you is the subdivision agreement pending these changes.
Yep.
Is there any questions or comments on that, or would anyone like to make a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for approval. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, please register your votes. Please display the votes.
Fairly, looking back, Campbell, Fritz, Miller, Schmidt, Hance, motion carries.
Thank you, guys. Item 14, consideration of an interlocal agreement with the Upper Big Blue Natural Resources District for assistance in funding levy accreditation. Greg?
This is just the 50-50 split with the NRD for our levy accreditation. I think it's up to 100 and, let's go look through here what we limited it to. But we've talked about this a number of times. They did approve it, the actual interlocal itself. Let me find the number for you. Their commitment's up to 175,000. I don't believe the total project is quoted at 150,000, but if it goes slightly over, they're committed to 75,000. So they're 50% of up to 150. And so we just have to do approval.
A motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, please register your votes. Please display the votes.
Fairly, looking back, Campbell, Fritz, Miller, Schmidt, Hance, motion carries.
Item 15, consideration of extension of real estate option and access agreement with Phyllis May Eggeter for real estate. Greg?
We have an option agreement that expires in February. We just want to continue this out to March to continue on our discussions with her for a more long-term option. And so we just recommend approval of this 30-day, a little over 30-day extension.
Move to approve. Second.
Motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, please register your votes. Please display the votes.
Fairly, looking back, Campbell, Fritz, Miller, Schmidt, Hance, motion carries.
16, consideration of approval of a revised interlocal agreement with the Seward, Saline County Solid Waste Management Agency. Greg?
That's a previous interlocal that we've generated into. Their board has recommended, I think you might have heard of this issue before, we have weighted votes based on population. Crete and Seward are both members of that, and we have the substantial population as it relates to the Waste Management Agency. They approached John Singleton, our representative on that board, and asked to amend their bylaws in the interlocal agreement to basically give every community one vote, thus seceding most of our power that we currently have due to the nature of it. And so, John, as you noted last time, is wanting input from this council to whether he should vote in favor of that or against it when they go back to the interlocal board to vote on these changes. My recommendation is don't secede power and to recommend that John vote against it. So.
Any questions or comments on that item, or would someone like to make a motion?
Move to vote against.
We have a motion to recommend not approving. We have a second. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, please register your votes. Please display the votes.
favor, welcome back Campbell, Fritz, Miller, Schmidt, and Haynes, motion carries.
All right, 17, consideration of approval of a job description for city engineer. Greg?
This has been a long time in the making. Pursuant to your budget for this year, we approved basically the conversion of what John Hughes' former position was that hasn't been filled into a city engineer position. We established a salary grade for that with our new salary ordinance that we approved in December. And so now we put together the job description. Me and Ed, and also Bonnie have worked over this in detail and tried to get as cleaned up as possible to cover a broad range of things that we can allow the city engineer to work on. So I think that what we've drafted is appropriate for now. Will work good in cohesion with Ed as he works on planning and zoning and building inspection, code enforcement, and other things that he'll be assigned to. And then try to make it all work. And so we just recommend approval of this job description.
Any questions or comments? Entertain a motion.
So move.
A motion for approval. There's a second from Dean. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, please register your votes. Please display the votes.
All in favor, welcome back Campbell, Fritz, Miller, Schmidt, and Haynes, motion carries.
18, consideration of approval of the downtown revitalization phase 2 program guidelines.
Just as we discussed last time, this is formal approval of the guidelines. They're included in your packet. The one thing I noted in discussions since 2 weeks ago was that we kind of had discussions on, and what I changed was I put in the definitive weighting for the applicants. And so the applicants that leverage the most additional dollars above and beyond the 50% match will be given higher priority in the application process as they all get turned in the first time. And so if you're putting in far more than 50%, you're going to be higher up, whether you're putting in a small amount or a large amount, as long as it's leveraging more. So that's the weighted position. The other thing that we discussed that I didn't put in there, and so I would ask some guidance on this tonight, and then I'll change it as we turn it in with approval, is the discussion, I didn't take away exactly the preference on LB $40, should they or should they not count towards the match? Because we strongly believe that there will be applicants that will apply for both LB 840 and DTR funds. I think we were leaning towards not having them match, not counting towards the match, but I don't know that we got anything definitive, so I'd ask for that to be a definitive element in your motion tonight if that's what you choose to do in approving this. So approve it with also the denial that LB 840 cannot be used for the cash match contribution.
We just want to make sure that there's skin in the game and that they're not looking to use our left hand to pay the match on our right hand through the LB 840 program. So I think that Jonathan, I think, was fine with that as well. I think we were kind of agreeing that that's the direction, but we wanted to run it past the council to make sure you didn't have any concerns with that.
So that it's not used for the match.
Yes.
Correct.
It's not used, counts towards their contribution.
Yes.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just to make sure on
Yeah.
which match you're talking
Yeah.
about.
Because potentially they would have no cash infusion at all in the
Right.
project.
So my question, since you bring that up, do we need specific or generic on what the match has to be? Because what if there's another program that I can go get dollars from and I'm gonna use that as my match?
I mean, if you want to also, the only other dollar amounts that we have from city funds is our CDBG reuse loan funds. I mean, if you want to add those in as well as not being eligible.
And the only,
I just think it should,
No.
just
It's a
definitively say it
good
needs to be
point.
50% of
the problem you run,
the
the problem you run
applicant's
into,
dollars.
the problem you run into is that depending on their source, like if they get a grant from someplace else, that's what you were talking about, is depending on how that, the stipulation on that grant is, you're looking at, practically speaking, a shift where the grant comes in, they're technically using their own dollars then to match, but they're really replacing their own dollars with the grant money, whether they do it that way or just simply use the grant money, it's just moving the money around, unless the specific dollars of the grant money on that end are tied to a specific purpose, then there's more restrictions on it. But if you get too specific, you're just forcing them to move money around as opposed to simply, my concern was I don't want them to use our money to match our money for their benefit if we could avoid it, so. But they can get a grant from somewhere else, arguably, or a loan or whatever from somewhere else, and, that's on them to figure out, I guess, unless the council has any concerns.
So Greg, I know you went through this last time, kind of slammed through it and gave us some details. I apologize, I did make notes, nothing of huge consequence that I want to have a huge discussion on tonight. My question would be, we submit this plan, we start down a process and things aren't going like we thought they would, are we able to edit this,
We are.
revise
A
it.
specific requirement of DED was a plan to, because what if the way you draft it somehow allows it so nobody can apply for it? Like it just doesn't functionally work for you or your community, then you need to go back to the drawing board so you can expend the funds. And so what we've written into it is with the approval of the city council and DED, that we could amend the plan so that if there's something that's kind of holding things up, in regards to the way the cash is flowing or the access to funds, we can go back and make edits, so. Yes, we could amend it.
Any other questions or comments? Would someone like to make a motion with the stipulation?
All right, I move to
Bring this
approve,
The downtown revitalization phase 2 program guidelines
thank you.
with,
Stipulation that LD 840 monies not be used to, be part of the match money for the project.
okay,
Yep.
alright, we have a
Second.
motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, please register your votes. Please for the votes.
What do you have, welcome back, Campbell Fritz Miller Schmidt Campus.
We did already do 19, so next we go to 20, city administrative report. Greg,
My report's in your packet. If you have any questions, let me know.
any questions?
Move to approve?
We have a motion, is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second, please register your votes. Please display the votes.
All in favor, welcome back, Campbell Fritz Miller Schmidt Campus. Motion
Any
carries.
future requests for council agenda items or administrative action? Seeing,
What about the
yes.
railroad crossing at the railroad?
We're still, in regards to the railroad crossing, we're still just waiting for, I wanna get official word, and I've tasked Mel with getting that from his contact at BNSF. So, we're still gonna press really hard to make sure that gets done this spring.
Is it possible, just asking in your city administrator report, things like that get asked about, that if you went to brought it up, I totally would have forgotten about? Can we have a bullet point somewhere of things that have been asked for that we're waiting on items? So they don't just disappear? Somebody asked about something and we just all forget about it.
Okay. Until a matter is resolved, if it's brought up as a,
Things that are pending.
things that are pending, we'll just leave it on there.
Put on your city administrator report as pending now.
Okay.
Any other items? If not, then, upcoming events, Jonathan, real quick.
Yes, so we will have Seward County Cleanup Day on Saturday, April 21st. And then also, Seward will be host for the bicycle ride across Nebraska on June 8th. So we'll be welcoming 500 bicyclists across the state. We're coinciding our cultural festival on that same night. We have an opportunity to actually get potentially some scholarship dollars. Being a host community, as well as if we're voted the best host community, we get additional scholarship dollars for our community students. And so we're really pleased. We've had some good community participation, so appreciate your support on that event. And so looking forward to that on June 8th.
Thanks, Jonathan. Next, we have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second, please register your votes. Please display the votes.
All in favor, welcome back, Campbell Fritz Miller Schmidt Campus. Motion carries.
Hey, thank you, everybody.